Hello, folks. So in this video, we will discuss about the use callback hook in React. In the last video, we have discussed about the use memo hook. Now the use callback hook is very similar to that. So in case you don't know how the use memo hook works, it's very recommended to watch the last video and then come back to this video. So without wasting any time in the intro, let's get started. So here I have one very simple React function. So I have the app function with only the use callback in h1 tags. That's it. So I will start by creating some state variables and then you will see how the use callback hook helps us in writing optimized functions. So first of all, I will create one count variable and also the set count function and I will initialize it to 0. And I will also create another function very similar to count, but this count increments by 2. So I will name it count2 and then set count2 and I will initialize it to 0 once again. Now, similarly, since we have the state variables, let's see how we can use them. So I will create one button and the button will have an on click and this on click will refer to one function. Let's call it handle click and let's name the button as simply count. And we will also have another button and I will name this as handle click 2 and let's name this thing as count 2. And also we should be having something to display the function. So let's say here I want to like not function, like I want to show the count variable and here the count2 variable. Now it will throw some errors because I don't have the function. So let's quickly write both the functions. So handle click and here what I want to do. Let me just do some console log first and that is button click and then I just want to increment my count. So set count will have access to ref count and I want to increment by 1. That's it. And I will simply copy this thing. I will make the handle click to function and let's name it button to click. And instead of pref count, we will have access to here the pref count 2. And this should be not the set count, it should be set count 2 once again. And here I want to increment by 2, let's say. So we have our things here. And one more thing is there is some 0 over here. I'm not sure where that is coming. Yeah, that is coming from the count 2. It should be wrapped under one h2 so that it looks a little bit better. So right now, if I click on count, it is incrementing by 1. And if I click on count 2, it is incrementing by 2. And we are also getting like button clicked and button to clicked. So no surprises over here. So now I will do one more thing. And that is I will create one child component. Now why I am creating, you will see soon. Because using the use callback hooks, we can actually memoize entire components. So in this case, we will memoize our child components. So I will name this child com and this child com will have access to one, let's say, child function that we will pass from the parent. And inside what I want to do is I want to basically, let's say, print something rendering a child component. And I think that's it. And then let me also return few things. So return h1. Let me simply write child com. That's it. And right now we don't see anything because we haven't really used our child com here. So here I will simply um, declare my child com and we will have child com in the screen. That is fine. But what I want to do is I want to create some function called childfn here, child function. And inside this function, what I want to do is let me simply log something, child function called, and I think that's it. I don't want anything else inside. And what we can simply do is we can inside the child com, I can pass this as a prop. So child fn equals to child fn. Now we will see something very interesting. So let's say, let me just refresh the screen. And when I click on count, I can see that button click and rendering child component. So that means that it is basically calling this console log from over here. And nothing is happening with the child event because although the child event is being passed as a prop, it is not being used. So what I can simply do, I can simply call the child event over here. So now if I clean everything up and if I click on count, as you can see, button click and then rendering child component and then child component called and it's coming twice because of the React strict mode. It's not really important. We can remove for maybe clarity. So right now everything will be called once. I mean, it was simply a feature, not a bug. So, okay, if I click on count, you can see button clicked, rendering child component and child component call. So these two lines and the second line, like child function called, it's coming from here. So these things are getting called. If I click on count two also, these two things are getting called. Now the issue is that are these things really dependent on the count and the count two? So let's say I am like adding my count. So what is the need for the child com to be rendered once again? It's not really important because it's like wasting my what should I say? This is not really an optimized code because this child com remains same. Everything is same, but it's getting called simply on changing one state variable. That is not even dependent. So this is one place the use callback hook comes into the picture. So what it can do is it can memoize the entire child com and it will only render the child com based on some conditions like whenever some variable that is dependent on the child com is changed, only then you render the child com, else you keep it the same as it is. So for example, let's say here only on the change of count I want to render the child com. Let's say that is a feature I want to build. So how can I do that? So that is something we will see now, and to do that we will import the use callback hook first. And let's say I want to memoize my child function. So how can I do that? So first of all, we cannot use the normal functions. We have to use arrow function. So I will write const child function. And here I want to memoize the entire thing. So I will use callback and then I will write the entire function inside. So this will be one arrow function and this is how where the function will close, and here I can pass one dependency array. So like based on what variables or whatever we are writing over here, if that variable changes, this child function will be rendered. It's very similar to like use effect as well as use memo, and the same thing happens in use callback. So now we have given nothing over here, and now let's see what happens when I click on the count and count to. So we can see that rendering child component and child function called is coming, and for the count to also. So nothing seems to be working. And why is that? And that is because this child com function component, it's not really memoized. And to memoize this thing, we will import one more thing, and that is called memo. And using this memo, we can memoize entire components, and that is something we will do over here. And also, one more thing is we cannot use the normal function over here. We have to use one arrow function. So I will simply delete the function. I will name it const childcom. Let me first change it to an arrow function, and this becomes an arrow function. So no issues. So it's simply an arrow function with no changes. And then we need to see how we can memoize this thing. So I will just take everything, use one parenthesis, and simply write memo. So now this whole thing is memoized. And now if I click on count, as you can see, only button clicked. So we are not getting this rendering child component and all of these things. And that is because it's not really required. So there is no change really. And let's say it's dependent on the count. So in that case, what will happen? So I will simply write count over here. And now when I'm changing the count, as you can see, the child component is getting rendered and this function is getting called. But when I'm clicking on the count to, let's say, nothing is working. Like nothing is working is actually good, right? This time, because that means the use callback hook is correctly working. So this is the basic use case of use callback. So only when this child component needs to be rendered, you can use the use callback hook accordingly, and then it will like optimize your code to a large extent. So yeah, that's the basic functionality of use callback. So that's it for this video, folks. So if you have learned something new in this video, consider liking the channel. It gives me a lot of motivation to create a lot more videos like this. So yeah, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.